We begin today at the Mishnah on Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis. Zog Heilige Mishnah at the bottom, right, the last line. Ein ma'arvim peiris bepeiris. If you're selling someone fruits, and you're selling fruits from, or produce, this could be wheat, grain, from one property, from one field, you're not allowed to mix produce from a different field. Afilu chadashim b'chadashim, even if the kind of produce that you're mixing from another field is the same quality, it's the same new produce like this field, but it doesn't matter. You're selling it from this field, the person is expecting to get from this field the quality from this field. Needless to say, chadashim b'yishanim. If you're selling older produce, older wheat, you're not allowed to mix in newer ones. Rashi says the reason is the older wheat, the older kernels are easier to make flour out of it. If you mix in newer, fresher ones, it's moister, it's harder to make flour out of it, so you're not allowed to mix in from the newer ones with the older ones. Now, in truth, it was said regarding wine as well, similar thing, that b'yayin, when it comes to wine, hitiro la'arev kosher berach, you're selling wine, and you have strong wine, and you have mild wine. If you're selling mild wine, you're allowed to mix in from the strong wine into the mild wine, because it only makes it better. So you're selling him mild wine, but you're selling him not better than what you said you're going to sell him. And similar, Rashi says, goes back to what the Mishnah said before, don't mix in from the new produce with the old, because the old is better. But if it's in the reverse, if you're mixing in from the old with the new, and you're giving better than what you told him you're selling him, so then you're also allowed. Another halacha regarding wine, when you sell the wine, you're not allowed to sell and mix in the sediments with the wine. But you are allowed to give him the sediments. Now the Mishnah is obviously contradicting itself. First it says you're not allowed to put in the sediments, then it says you could give the sediments. The Gemara will explain what the Mishnah is saying. A person that has water that was mixed into the wine, you should not sell it in the store for people, unless he lets every individual that he sells to, the customer, know that this is wine that has water in it. This wine that was diluted, you shouldn't sell it to a merchant that sells wine. Even if he notifies this merchant that I'm selling you wine that's diluted, because this merchant that sells wine will then go and sell it in his store, and he's not going to let the customers know that it has water in it. But if it's a place where this is the norm, it's a custom to put water, to dilute the wine, then you can put water in the wine and you can sell it this way because everybody knows this is what it is. Hatagar, a merchant that's selling grain, he gets his grain from different producers, from different field owners, from 5 different storehouses, and he puts it into one storehouse that he sells from, because everybody knows that he doesn't get all of his grain that he sells from one person. He gets it from a lot of different people, and people understand that it's different qualities from different people. He's not trying to fool them. Similar, person selling wine, he can get wine from 5 different wine presses. He puts it all into one barrel. People understand that he's taking from different people. But this is only if he's not intentionally mixing in poorer quality with better quality. If a person lets everybody know, I get all my wine or most of my wine from one individual, and people expect a certain quality. And then you mix in from someone else, which is poorer quality, and your intention is to try to mix in poorer quality here, that's not allowed. We learned, needless to say, regarding the halacha that it said in the Mishnah, mixing in the newer produce, which is not as good for using it to make flour out of it. So needless to say, the chadashes, this newer produce, meyarba, it's cheaper. You can get 4 measures for it. The Yushana is the older ones, the older kernels, is mishalish. You can only get 3 for it. It's more expensive. It can be used right now to make flour out of it. So needless to say that in such a case, the marvin, you're not allowed to mix in from the newer kernels into the older ones. You're giving them cheaper quality. Even if it's the newer produce, that's actually more expensive. The Yushana is ma'arba, and the older ones are cheaper. You can get 4 for it. So you would think, in such a case, if you're mixing in from the newer produce, you're just giving him from more expensive. So it should be allowed. Ma'arvin, you're still not allowed to mix in. And the Braisa explains the only reason it's more expensive is sometimes a person is interested in buying dafka from the newer produce because he wants to store it and keep it for a later time, and then later, when it gets older and it's going to be easy to make flour out of it, he's going to use it then. So therefore, it's possible that in the market, for some people, this will be more expensive. But really, for someone that's buying and is expecting to get the kernels that are going to be available right now to make flour out of it, you're not allowed to mix in some from the newer kernels that you won't be able to use right now. Then the Mishnah said, when it comes to wine, you're allowed to mix strong wine into mild wine because it only makes it better. Rabbi Lazar here explains, what's this expression? The Mishnah says, be'emes omru. Ada omra. This teaches us, Ada is like Zeus meres, kol be'emes omru. Anytime it says in the Mishnah, this expression of be'emes omru, halachihi. It's coming to say that this is the halacha. There are sometimes the other places where it says that the term be'emes amru is when the Mishnah is saying a halacha l'moshe misinai. Here we're obviously talking about the takana midrabanan, but because this is a takana or something the Chachamim said that the halacha is like this, so it's like a halacha l'moshe misinai that no one argues about. Rav Nachman said about what it said in the Mishnah that you could mix better wine, the stronger wine, with the milder wine. This is only in the times when they actually press the grapes and the time when they produce the wine. And the reason for this is, Rashi explains, because when they make the wine and the wine is still fermenting, when you mix different wines, the flavor blends together and it becomes a nice geschmack blended wine. But after it's done, after the wine already, each wine has its own distinct aroma and taste, and you mix it afterwards, even if you mix a better wine with a weaker wine, it doesn't make it any better, it ruins it. So the Gemara says on this, but now we see the Kama'arvi Shalei ben Agitais, that the people that sell wine, they do mix wines, even not in the time when it's fermenting, in the time when they press the wine. Rav Papa says the reason it's allowed is because the Yadi, the Kamachli. People are aware of this, that wines are being blended, and people are Meichel, even though it means it's not such a superior quality. A different reason why now it's allowed. Homani Rabachihi. This that we do today follows what Rav Acha says. The Tanya, we learned, Rav Acha says, Matir bedova hanitam. You're allowed to mix different things together if it's something that when people buy it, they taste it, and if they taste it, they see exactly what it is. Such a thing you're allowed to mix together. So when people buy wine, it's being mixed because people taste it, and they see exactly what they're getting. Now the Mishnah said, you're not allowed to mix the sediments of the wine with the wine. And right afterwards, the Mishnah said that you're allowed to put the sediments in. So the Gemara asks the contradiction. First, you say klal, you're not allowed to mix it at all. And right afterwards, you say that you could put the sediments inside the wine. So the Gemara says, if you want to answer as follows: my noisin or my avol noisin loyeshmarav. What does the Mishnah mean when it says that you could put in the sediments into the wine? The kamaydale. That's if you notify him that you're putting the sediments into the wine. Stam to put it in without letting the customer know, you're not allowed. But if you're letting him know, then it's allowed. Says the Gemara, that's not what the Mishnah is saying. How do we know? Because Hamidikton is safe later on in the Mishnah, over there it says, when you dilute the wine, you can't sell it in the store unless you let the customers know. And then it says you don't sell this diluted wine to a merchant, even if you do let him know, because then he's going to end up using it, selling it to customers without letting them know. So here later in the Mishnah, it brings up and makes this distinction between whether you let him know or you don't let him know. So Miklal, from this we understand that Reisha, earlier in the Mishnah, when it talks about the sediments of the wine, over there it didn't make this distinction. It doesn't talk about whether you let him know or not. That means that over there, when it's saying that you're allowed to mix in the sediments, that's even if you don't let him know. So therefore the contradiction is still a question. Amar Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda answers, Hachi ka'amar. This is the understanding of the Mishnah. You're not allowed to mix shmarim shal emesh, the sediments of the wine that you made yesterday, b'shal yoim, with the wine that you pressed and made today. And not the sediments of the wine from today, b'shal emesh, with the wines from yesterday. When you take sediments from different wines and you mix them with another wine, that ruins the quality of the wine. So that's not allowed. That was the first din of the Mishnah. But then the Mishnah said, Aval Neisan Loi as Shmarov. You're allowed to place the sediments of this wine into the wine. Even if you took it out for whatever reason, and then you're selling it, you want to put the sediments back into the wine. If it's from this wine, you're allowed to put it back in. It doesn't ruin the quality of the wine. Tanya Nami Yachi, this is what we learned in the Braisa as well. Rabbi Yehuda says, if you're pouring wine out, the word term shayfa means you're pouring it out slowly so that the sediments shouldn't come along. So you're pouring out this wine for your friend. Don't mix in the sediments from the wine of yesterday with today's wine, and not the wine from the sediments of the wine from today with yesterday's. You're allowed to mix the wine from yesterday with the sediments of the wine from yesterday with yesterday's and today's from today's. Rashi says it's lav dafke today and yesterday. It just means that if it's the same wine, then you can take the sediments and put it back in. But if it's from a different kind of wine, then you're not allowed to put it back in. It ruins the wine. Okay, then the Mishnah said, if you had water that was mixed into the wine, so you shouldn't sell it this way in the store, unless you're letting each customer know that it's diluted wine. So the Gemara brings a story that happened. Rava, they brought him wine from the store. Mazge, he diluted the wine, Tame, and then he tasted it, and it wasn't tasty for him. He didn't want to buy it. So Shadri lechanusa, he sent it back to the store after he diluted it, that the storekeeper should return it and he could sell it to someone else. So Abaye says to Rava, how could you send it back after you diluted it? What did we learn in our Mishnah? If you have diluted wine, you're not allowed to give it or sell it to a merchant of wine because he then is going to sell it to his customers without letting them know. So how did Rava send back this diluted wine to the storekeeper? Amalei, so Rava answers Abaye, mezge didi meidi yediyah. The way I dilute my wine, that's something that all customers are going to know that it's diluted wine. And the reason is because he diluted it very much. There was a lot of water in this wine, so it's something that you can't fool customers about this. Now, Rav himself clarifies, if you'll say that we should be concerned that maybe the merchant that I'm giving back this diluted wine to, he may add some wine to it, and then you won't be able to tell that it was diluted wine, and that's how he's going to sell it. So there's still a concern that he might fool his customers. So Rava says, we're not concerned for that because in Cain, if this is what you're concerned for, ein l'dovasaf, there's no end. So then maybe you should say you can't sell water to someone because he might take that water and add wine into it, and then it'll be diluted wine, and he'll sell it to his customers. This halacha that you're not allowed to sell something to someone that he could fool his customers with it, it's only if it's in its current condition, he's going to fool his customers. We're not concerned that maybe he's going to change it and then fool his customers, because if you go there, then there's no end to this. And the Mishnah said, if the minig is that the wine is diluted, so then you could dilute the wine and sell it this way. Tana, in the Braisa we learned, whether the custom is half water, or a third water, or a quarter water, whatever the minig is. And Rav said about this, it's in the time when they press the wine, that's when the wine is diluted, then you can sell it this way. Rabbi Yehuda says, a storekeeper is not allowed to sell roasted kernels or nuts for the kids. He's not allowed to distribute it for the kids in his store. And the reason is because this is how you will get all the children to be accustomed to come only to his store, and you're taking away all the business from all of your competitors. So you're taking away parnasa from another yid. So you're not allowed to do that. And the Chachamim say, no, it's allowed. If this is a way for you to get business, it's allowed. And we pass like the Chachamim. Another thing Rabbi Yehuda says is you're not allowed to lower the price below market value in order to lure in customers into your store. However, Chachamim say, no, he should be remembered for the good. It's actually a positive thing if he lets the price down. Gemara will explain. Another halacha, you're not allowed to take the beans, and that are these beans are split beans, and then it has a lot of peels and schmutz in it. You're not allowed to clean it out and sell it that way, because when a person sees these clean beans, so he says, oh, it's such clean beans, so then you could overcharge him a lot more, and then he will realize what it's actually worth. So therefore you have to sell the beans together with the schmutz. The customer knows exactly what he's getting, and he knows what the price is. Divrei Abishol. That's Abishol's opinion. Chachamim say no, it's allowed. The person will see, he'll understand exactly what was taken out and what the labor involved was, and he's not gonna. There's no concern that it'll be overcharged. Chachamim though agree, Shalayavar Malpi Megura. If you have these split beans and you're just going to clean it out on the top layer, on the opening, and the person looks at it and it seems to be all such beautiful clean beans, and then at the bottom though it's dirty with all the schmutz over there. So then you're stealing his eye. His eye sees, seems like it's clean. Another halacha when you fool a customer, you're not allowed to beautify. The Gemara will explain how and what this means. Lo yasa adam, if there's a person that's being sold as an Evet Kanani, and you want to beautify him, that it seems like he's younger and stronger. V'lo yasa beheme, or not an animal that you're selling, and v'lo yasa kelim, and not vessels either. Okay, so the Gemara goes back to the first thing in the Mishnah. Why did the Rabbanan say that you're allowed to sell a person that's selling? He's allowed to distribute for children roasted. What does it say? The kloyas, the roasted kernels, or the nuts. Why are you allowed to distribute that? And Tanakama, Rav Yudah said that it's not allowed. You're taking away the business from everyone else. The Amalei, because this store owner that's distributing this to the children, he says, look, ana mifaligna am guzi. I'm giving out walnuts or walnuts. Vat palik shiski, and you give out shiski, which is prunes. Rashi says. So this is a promotional thing you can do in a store. Everybody can give out whatever he wants in order to get customers. So that's all totally allowed. Then the Mishnah said, you shouldn't lower the price below the market value. But Chachamim say, no, the person should be remembered for the good if he does this. So the Gemara explains, what does he mean by this? My time is the Rabbanon, and what's the reason of what the Rabbanon say? And says the Gemara, Mishom the Kamarvach Latara. Because what he's doing is, he's bringing the whole price of the produce down, and then the wholesalers will see that the price of the retailers, it all went down. They're going to sell also their produce for a cheaper price. So by a person lowering the price in the store, so he's bringing more business to himself, but then eventually he's going to cause everyone to bring the price down. So the Gemara explains over here regarding a person that's selling these beans that are split and he cleans it out. So the Chachamim say there's no problem with this. You're allowed to sell it this way. A person won't be fooled by this. Why not? Says the Gemara, Man Chachamim. Who are the Chachamim of our Mishnah? Rabache. It's Rabache that was quoted before in Amud Aleph. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, Rabache matir bedova hanire. Rabache, before actually Rabache said regarding something that you taste. That's something that the person can see what it is when he tastes it, so therefore there's no issue if it's diluted. So over here, Rabacha similar says, Bedava nere is something that a person can estimate. He can see with his eyes that it was cleaned out. He knows exactly what it is, the schmutz that was taken out, and what the labor involved is. So he's not going to be overcharged. And the Mishnah said, You're not allowed to beautify a person, animal, or vessels that you sell. So on a Braisa we learned, you're not allowed to be misharvet a behemah, which means that you make this animal look much fatter by making its ears stick out, like standing out. And how do you do that? The Gemara will soon say how. And also another thing, when you have the kravayim, the innards of the animal, the stomach of the animal, and you blow it up, and it seems to be like it's a large piece of meat, and really it's not. You're not allowed to do that either. You're not allowed to soak the meat in water, and it gives it a little bit of a whitish look, that it should look like a fatty piece of meat and not like a lean piece of meat. Now the Gemara explains, my ein misharvetin. When it says ein misharvetin, how is this done? Hacha, over here in Bavel, Tirgamu, they explained this and they said, what this means is, maye de chizre. If you give the animal to drink, bran water, I think it is. Yeah, so then it causes the animal its ears stick out, and the animal blows up, and it looks like it's a fat animal, even if it's not. Ziri Amar Rav Kahane, Ziri said in the name of Kahane, no, it's done in a different way. Maskefta, which is some kind of a comb or a brush that has these very thick the pieces in it, and you can like comb out the hair to make the animal look fatter than it is. So now here the Gemara brings different Amirayim that actually did different things to beautify the item that they were selling. Shmuel Shara Lemirme Tumi Lesarbala. Shmuel allowed to place some pieces of silk on a coat that was sold to make it look more expensive and nicer. Rav Yehuda Shara Lechischuse Karmi. Rav Yehuda allowed to harden the material of a garment that he sold with memei subin, also with flax water or with what kind of water? Starch. Okay, with starch, and to make it look stiff, and it made it look more expensive. Rabbe shara lemeidek tzadi. Rabbe allowed to take these garments that are made from. They're made from. They're made from this cheap material. And what he would do is they would beat it, and it would get stretched out, and it would look like it was like this fine material, even though it wasn't. Rave share litzlumi giri. Rave allowed when you sell giri, which are chitzim, when you're selling arrows, he allowed to make pictures on it to make it look nicer. Rav Papa Bashmuel share litzlumi dekuli. Rav Papa Bashmuel allowed to make pictures on these wicker baskets, also to make it look more beautiful. So all these Amiraim allowed all these different things to be done to items that they sold, even though it beautifies it. So the Gemara asks on them, but the Mishnah said, you're not allowed to beautify a person, or an animal, or not any of the vessels. So all these vessels here, how are they allowed to beautify them? So the Gemara answers like Kashi, it's not a question on them. Here they sold perfect, new condition, good quality. They weren't trying to fool the customer by making it look nicer than it is. There was really new quality. It's just they were making it look nice, and that's okay. Batiki. But if it's older items, and by beautifying it, you're making the customer think it's brand new, that's what's not allowed. Okay, now when it said in the Mishnah, regarding a human being, so pirkus the adam maihi, when you beautify a person, how is this done? What is it that you do to beautify a person? So the Gemara says, dahu avda saba. There was a case with an Evet, and Rashi says this is an Evet Kanani, after the time of the Beis HaMikdash when there's no Yovel, so this is an Evet Kanani. So he was old already, and he was being sold as an Evet Kanani. So what did he do? The Azal Tzavil Ereishel Adikne. He went and he dyed his hair in his head and his beard, and he looked like he had nice black hair and he was young. Osla Kamed Ravi came to Rave, asked Rave if he wants to buy him. Amalei Zivnon, he says to Rave, buy me. Amalei, Rave responded, Yiu Aniyim B'nei Beischa. Let poor people be in your home to help you. In other words, I'm going to have poor Yidden in my house help me. I don't need you as my slave. Osla Kamed Rav Papa Bashmuel. So this slave came then to Rav Papa Bashmuel and said, Zavne. That again, he came to Rav Papa Bashmuel Zavne, and Rav Papa Bashmuel actually did buy him. He looked like a young, good slave. Then Yom Echad, one day, Omalei, Rav Papa Bashmuel says to his new slave, Ashkin Maya, go and get me water to drink. So what did he do? Now he went and he removed the dye from his hair, and now he showed that he has white hair. And Amalei, he says to Rav Papa Bashmuel, Chazi, look, I'm even older than your father, and I have no kayach to help you, to bring you any water. So he saw that he got a slave that's really old and frail, and he can't even help him. Kari and Avshei, Rav Papa Bashmuel said on himself, the pasuk, Tzadik mitzara nechlatz. A tzaddik, Hashem saves him from a tzara. This refers to Rave, where the slave also offered himself to be sold to Rave, but Rave did not buy him. And someone else comes in his place and gets this tzara, which in this case, Rav Papa Bashmuel said on himself, look, I got this slave that's worthless. Hadran Allah Chazav, we shall return to you, the fourth Pedic of Masechta Bava Metzia, Pedic Hazav. Okay, we begin the next Pedic, Pedic Ezo Neshech. This is the Pedic that discusses all of the halachas of ribis. There is the halachas of ribis minat Torah, as we'll see in the sugya in this Pedic. When it applies, the concept of ribis is when you lend someone money on interest. And then there's a lot of different halachas of ribis that we'll see in this Pedic, which is only ribis midrabanan, that Chachamim instituted that is not allowed. That's usually what's called avak ribis. It's the dust of ribis, it's only asim midrabanan. And then there's also certain things that are asim because of haramas ribis, when you're trying to avoid ribis and so on. A lot of different details and sometimes complex details regarding the halachas of ribis. Chlal b'negei to the union of ribis. There's a beautiful sikha from the Rebbe in Chelik Gimel in Parshas Bahar, where the Torah says the Isra of ribis, where the Rebbe explains the union of ribis. Just one akudah there. That the idea of ribis is that you're helping another yid in his time of need, and there's sort of a partnership between you and him. You're giving him money and you're helping him to be able to do what he has to with it. Similar, the Eibusha says the partnership between a yid and Hashem is that the person that doesn't lend on ribis, he's allowing also for the partnership between him and Hashem, the right blend of the partnership. That's the Teichen that the Rebbe speaks about there. Barichas in the Sicha, Rebbe explains Avodas Hashem, where on one hand you need the help from above, and at the same time the kavana is that the person should do his part to serve Hashem from below. That's the idea of ribis beruchnius. Okay. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah, Eizehu neshech ve'eizehu tarbis. What is considered to be neshech? When you look in the psukim in the Torah, it says two expressions regarding ribis. It says the term neshech, which literally means you're biting out of someone else's money. And then it uses the term tarbis as well. Tarbis means you're increasing your money by charging interest. So what are these two things that it says in the Torah? Neshech and tarbis. So the Mishnah says, Eizehu neshech, what is the case where there is neshech, where you're biting out of another person's money? Hamalve sela, you lend a person a sela, and a sela is made up of 4 dinrim, behei dinrim, but you're charging him an extra dinner, that he has to pay you back interest, 1 more dinner. Or sasayim chitim, you lend him 2 saw of wheat, b'shalosh, and he has to pay you back 3. So that's the neshech, where you're biting out of the other person's possession or money. So aser, this is not allowed, because you're biting out of his property, out of his money. What is the tarbis? So now here, Rashi clarifies, we'll see from the Gemara, that the example that the Mishnah here is going to give for tarbis is actually not an example of an isser of ribis min atayra. It's an example of isser ribis min derabanan. And really, the example that the Mishnah just gave, the 2 examples of ribis, which the Gemara calls, the Mishnah that is, calls neshach, it's also tarbis. Neshach and tarbis, as the Gemara is going to point out, there's really 2 sides of the same coin. Neshach is the fact that you're biting out of his money, and the tarbis is that your money is getting increased. So in the case that we just mentioned, the ribis min atayra, it's both neshach and tarbis. But still, the Gemara says there is a case of tarbis, and the Mishnah here is using this veizeo tarbis as an example only for ribis midrabanan. So one of the basic points about ribis is that in order for it to be awesome in atayra, it has to be a ribis which is b'derech halva. It has to be in a loan. If it's a ribis that's not in a loan, but it's a ribis that comes out to be like interest in a transaction of a sale, even if it's basically like ribis, but because it's not in the framework of a loan, it's not ribis min atayra. That's the ribis midrabanan. So the Mishnah here is going to give an example of a ribis midrabanan in the framework of a sale. So the Mishnah is like, Hamar bepedes, a person that increases his fruits in a sale. Ketzad, how does he do this? So here, this case of ribis is the case where the customer, the buyer, is the one that's gaining over here and the one that's sort of charging interest. How is that? So the Mishnah makes the case as follows. There's a few details here to this case. First, you buy from someone a amount of chitim, and the Mishnah says right away how much chitim this is. Hakor, a core of chitim, and the price of it is a dinar zav. Dinar zav is 25 silver coins. That's the price that you pay to the seller in advance for this chitim that you're going to buy for him. And when you pay this money to him in advance for the whole season that he's going to give you now for this price, for a dinner, for 25 silver coins, this amount of chitim, v'chein hashar. When you gave him this amount of money for this amount of wheat, the market value was already set. And if the market value was already set, then there's no issue with doing this. Why is the Mishnah saying this? What does it mean, v'chein hashar? The point is, if you would give someone in advance, you pay him, and you tell him, look, I'm paying you right now in advance, and this is the price that I'm giving you. And then you say, look, even if later on the market price is going to be more expensive, but nevertheless, I'm going to get, according to this cheaper price, you're going to give me more produce. Then there's the issue of ribis midrabanan. Because basically the buyer here is paying in advance, he's giving up his money, he's allowing the seller to have his money in advance, and in return, he's getting according to a cheaper value of fruits that he set with him right now, before there was any market value that was set. That's like ribis, even though it's in the framework of a sale, it's only ribis midrabanan, but that is ribis midrabanan. However, the point of it here is, once there is already a market value that was set, hashar, once there's a market value that's set already, so in such a case, there's no din of ribis midrabanan. Because since the market value is set, so then when you give him this amount of money, the seller can go and get for this price that's already set right now, he can get you that produce right now. So it's as if he already gave it to you right now, even though if he's going to end up giving it to you later, when the market value will be different, it doesn't matter. It's not considered to be ribis. So that's not a problem. What happens if the chitim changed, the price went down? So now you can get chitim, or again, amdu chitim belamed dinarim. Sorry, what happened over here is the price of the chitim went up. Now the chitim, you have to pay for it 30 dinarim. So as I mentioned before, a dinar is 25 dinarim. And now the price went up and you have to give 30 dinarim. So he says now to the seller, ten li chitai. Give me my wheat that I paid you already in advance, and give it to me on the cheaper price that I made up with you, which is a 25 dinar, and give it to me because I want to have now this wheat, and now I could sell this wheat for 30 dinar, and then I'll be able to buy wine with it. That's the point. That's what I want to do now. That's what he's telling the seller. So far, there is no issue of ribis here, not minatayra, and not midrabanan. And again, the reason why there's no issue of ribis over here, even though in a way what's happening is the buyer is gaining more than what he's paying for. Because he paid one price in advance, and because he paid a cheaper price in advance, so now even later, when the price goes up, he still gets the cheaper amount and he gets more wheat. But why is there no ribis? Because as long as the price was set in the beginning, the halacha, when you gave that amount in the beginning, there's no halacha, there's no issue of ribis even with the rabbanan. Once there's that set price, as I mentioned, then the seller is able to give him right then that produce or that wheat, right then according to the price that's set then. The fact that he's giving it to him later, that's his choice. So therefore over here so far there's no issue of ribis. Okay, but now here though, what happened is the buyer is saying, give me now the wheat that's worth 30 dinarim, because I made up with you that I'm going to get this amount for the cheaper price that it was before. Now, so now the seller tells the buyer, Harei chitecha asuyis alai b'shloishim. So this wheat that you want, I don't have the wheat to give you, but it should be on me for the value of 30. And and instead of me giving you this wheat for the value of 30 dinar, I'll give you wine instead. I'm going to give you wine instead because that's what you want. You told me you want to get this wheat so that you could sell it to buy wine. So I'm going to give you instead wine. And this seller doesn't really have any wine in his possession to give to him. He has no wine to give him. In such a case, if you're telling him now that you're going to give him wine with this value that it is now, that's 30 dinar, this is going to be ribis, because you're setting it with him now a price of 30, and then when you don't have the wine in your possession at all, what happens if later on you're going to want to give him the wine? Maybe then the price is going to go up, and maybe it's going to be worth 40, and you're going to have to give him according to the cheaper price that it is now. So therefore, this is considered to be ribis, that you're giving him now based on the price that it's going to be later, and later the value is going to go up. Okay, the Gemara is going to explain the details of this case much more. Regarding this last case over here with the wine, that's where the issue of the ribis is midrabanan, even though there is a price, a market price that's already set, and nevertheless there will be an issue of ribis. The Gemara is going to explain it later. We'll see all the details of the case in the Gemara Metzia. Okay, the Gemara here starts now with the beginning of the Mishnah. Mideshavik liribis da oiraise v'kamefarish derabanan. When the Mishnah explains, first it explains neshech, and it gives two examples of ribis minatayra. Then when it comes to explain tarbis, it gives an example of ribis midrabanan. So Meklal, what that proves is the iraise, the neshech, v'tarbis, chodem ilsihi. That minatayra, really the two terms of neshech and tarbis, is really all one and the same thing. That's why it's not giving you an example for tarbis as another type of ribis minatayra. Every ribis is both neshech and tarbis. As I mentioned before, neshech is the loss that you're biting out of the other person's money, and the tarbis is the increase that the lender has when he charges the ribis. But the Gemara asks on this, but doesn't it say in the psukim two different things? It says neshech kesef and viribis oichel, that you shouldn't bite out of another person's money, and you shouldn't increase oichel from food that you take from another person. So if the Torah divides it, shouldn't it be that neshech and tarbis are two different things, even in a Torah? So the Gemara says, "V'tizbere, is this logical to say the ikke neshech b'loi tarbis v'tarbis b'loi neshech? Is it possible to say that you could have neshech where you bite out of another person's money and you have no increase, or v'tarbis, where you have an increase, below neshach, even if you didn't buy it out of the other person's money, it's always dependent one on another. It goes together. And the Gemara points out how this is true. Neshach below tarbis. If you would argue to say that you can buy it out of another person's money, but there was no increase by you, Hechidami, how would you think that would be? If you lend someone money, you lent him 100 coins, and you say you have to give me back interest 120. Now the case here is in the beginning, these 100 prutis that you lent this person, so their value is 100 of these coins for a danke. A danke is a silver coin, so we're estimating it according to this silver coin, which is the main way to estimate the money here. So in the beginning, these 100 coins was worth a danke. But then in the end, the value of this danke went up, and now it's 120 for this danke. Okay, so now it changed. So, but now in the end, the 120 is worth that same danke as 100 was in the beginning. So maybe you'll want to argue and say, neshechike, you are biting out of his money when you're charging him interest that he has to pay you back 120. Why? The kanochisle, you're biting out of him. The kashakom yinei midi de layav. You're taking from him something that he didn't give you, that you didn't give him. That is, you gave him 100, and you're charging him back 120 of these coins. So you are biting out of him. But then maybe you could argue v'tar bis leka, but you are not experiencing any increase in your value. Why? The less later vache, because there's no gain for you. The danke oisvei. The 100 coins that you lent him, at that time, it was worth one danke of that silver coin. And the danke kashakumine. And when you get back 120 coins, now 120 coins is the same danke that you lent him. So maybe this would be the case where there is neshech, but there's no tarbis. Says the Gemara, no, that's not. This is not true, because sof in the end, you have to decide how do you look at this. If you look at the value of what you lent, how it was at the beginning when you lent him the money, so then harei neshech and v'harei tarbis. Then there's both. You're biting out of his money, you're charging him interest, an extra 20 coins, and you also, according to the value of now, you're increasing your value. You're getting more than a danke. That's if you say that you go according to the beginning. If you're going to say that you have to look at whether it's ribus or not, you look at the time of payment at the end. So then, so then you're not biting out of him, because you gave him the amount that's the value of a danke, and he's giving you back the same value of a danke, and you're not gaining anything more than what you gave him. So in this case, if there's neshech, there's tarvis. If there's no neshech, there's no tarvis. You can't divide them from each other. And Besu, further, the Gemara says, tarbis, below neshech, if you would argue to say, maybe you could have an increase in the value of what you're charging, below neshech, without biting out of the other person's money, hechidami, how would that be, if you would argue to say so? Either oizif meya b'meya, if the case is that you lent him 100 coins, and you made up, he should pay you back 100 coins. But now here the case was, in the beginning, 100 coins makes up a danke. But in the end, these 100 coins are actually worth more than a danke. A chumsha, which is a sixth or a certain amount more than a danke. Every danke is made up of six coins. I'm not sure which type of coins, but over here now it's made up of 5 coins. So now the price of the danke is more. So even though you tell him to pay you back the same amount of money that you lent him, but by him paying back the same amount of money, you're actually gaining, because now that same amount of money is worth more. So you may say there's tarbis, you're gaining, but you didn't bite anything out of him more than what you gave him, because it was meya b'meya. You gave him 100 coins and he's giving you back 100 coins. So again, the Gemara says you can't divide these two things over here. If you follow the way the status of this money was in the beginning when you lent it, so not you're biting out of him and not you're gaining anything, because it's 100 for 100 coins. If you follow at the time of payment, so then yes, you are biting out of his money and you are also gaining, because now the same 100 coins has more of a value. So you're biting out of him, you're charging him more, and you're gaining. So therefore, the Gemara says, Ella Omar Rava, therefore Rava concludes, There's no way you find the neshech where you're biting out of the other person's money and you're gaining, or without you gaining, or you gaining without biting out of the other person's money. It goes together. The Torah didn't divide them into two details. It's two lavin. Whenever you charge interest, there are two isurim that are happening here. The fact that you're taking away his money is one isur, and the fact that then you're gaining this way, that's another detail of the isur. So, but it's really not possible minat Torah to divide one from the other. That's why when the Mishnah brings tarbis, it only brings an example of a ribis midrabanan in the framework of a sale. Okay.